Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day of GEEF, Global Engagement Empowerment Forum 2025. My name is Jae-eun Shin. I'm an assistant professor at Underwood International College in Yonsei University, majoring in Sustainable Development Cooperation. It is truly an honor to serve as your MC for today's sessions in this Grand Ballroom A venue. And over the course of the day, we will explore critical global challenges and innovative solutions aligned with this year's theme, Time for Action, Bridging Divides for a Sustainable Future. We have an exciting lineup for discussions ahead. And our first session today, Enhancing Climate Resilience for Sustainable Urban Futures, was selected through the call for a session emphasizing its significance in tackling one of the most pressing urban challenges of our time. We are privileged to have an esteemed panel of experts who will share their insights on building climate resilience for sustainable cities. This session will be moderated by Professor Dong-geun Yoon from Yonsei University. Let's warmly welcome them with a big round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this session. This session is about enhancing climate resilience for sustainable urban futures. So my name is Dong-geun Yoon, and I'm a professor in the Department of Urban Planning and Engineering at Yonsei University. And I'm truly honored to serve as the moderator for today's sessions. So we have organized this session to highlight the critical role of urban resilience in addressing climate risk, protecting lives, minimizing disaster impact, and ensuring the sustainability of cities. In today's session, we will explore some ways to strengthen climate resilience through effective policies, urban planning, and strong governance. We also explore some real-world case studies from the United States, Japan, and Korea that showcase efforts to manage climate risk and enhance urban resilience. So for these sessions, we are privileged to have four distinguished scholars with us today. I think each of whom has made a significant contribution to the field of climate resilience and urban sustainability. Now, I would like to introduce our esteemed speakers. So our first speaker next to me, Professor Carl Kim from the University of Hawaii. He's a highly respected expert in the field of disaster risk management and resilience planning with over 25 years of experience. As the Executive Director of the National Disaster Preparedness Planning Training Center, NDPTC, he has been a key figure in training and educating more than 70,000 first responders and emergency managers on various aspects of disaster preparedness, response, and recovery strategies in Hawaii. Our second speaker is Professor Kanako Iuchi from Tohoku University International Research Institute of Disaster Science, IRIDES. Actually, I have met her just the last week at the World Bosai Forum in Sendai, Japan. Her research focuses on post-disaster recovery and resilience planning, emphasizing how affected communities can not only rebuild but also bounce forward by integrating resilience principles into their reconstruction efforts. And our third speaker is Professor Jae-min Song from Seoul National University. She specialized in sustainable urban planning and environmental policy. Her research focuses on how cities can develop and implement adaptive strategies to effectively address climate-related challenges by integrating long-term planning and governance mechanisms. Our last speaker is Professor Tae-dong Lee from Yonsei University, Department of Political Science and International Studies. He's a leading scholar in the field of climate governance and civic engagement. His work examines the role of policy institutions and the local communities in advancing climate actions. In addition to his academic contributions, he actively leads practical initiatives such as climate adaptation living lab. So think where real-world solutions are designed and tested, enhance urban resilience and sustainability. So before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that each speaker will have approximately 10 minutes. 10 minutes for their presentation. So after all the presentation, we will take some brief Q&A session. So let us begin our first presentation. So Professor Carl Kim, and he will talk about the planning and governance of urban climate resilience. So please.
I'm really delighted to be here with you. I think this is an important, challenging topic. What I'll do is give you a little bit of background on some of the work we've been doing in Hawaii, and then focusing on some recent fire cases in Maui, Lahaina, and also California. I've been involved with the damage assessment, and this relates to the work that we do using disasters as learning opportunities. You know, in Hawaii, I'm primarily known as a transportation planner. I do a lot of work in terms of evacuation and supply chain management. It's often referred to as emergency support function number one, because without effective transportation systems, you often cannot have effective response or recovery actions. In Hawaii, while I think of myself as a serious transportation and disaster researcher, I'm known as Dr. Disaster. And in part because Hawaii is known for many different hazards. We have active volcanoes, tsunami risk, and of course flooding, which is the most common hazards. And so a lot of the work that we've done has focused on the natural hazards, but then also the cascading effects of infrastructure failures and the impacts to communities. And right now we face very significant climate threats and hazards, climate and weather related hazards, in addition to flooding and hurricanes. And now there's also many, many other types of weather-related hazards. In the U.S., we keep track of billion-dollar weather disasters. 2 years ago, in 2023, we set a record in terms of the 27 different weather-related disasters. Unfortunately, Hawaii also made the list with the Maui fires, which I'll talk a little bit about in terms of this really devastating impact that occurred in August 8th of 2023. You know, it's a complex disaster because it started as a woodland, probably by power lines, and then spread to grasslands, and then spread to one of the oldest urban historic districts. There were many thousands of people that were impacted, that lost their homes or jobs or businesses, and more than 102 people were killed in this disaster. And we've been studying this and how to recover from it and learn from it. I also came back 2 weeks ago. I assisted the California state government with doing the damage assessments from the California fires. Much, much larger, probably 20 times larger in size. Yet only 28 people passed away. I mean, still a large number. There were more than 250,000 people that were under evacuation orders. So there are some important lessons and commonalities. We're still totaling up the cost of this disaster, but it will involve billions and billions of dollars in terms of recovery. So many, many historic structures. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Rand McNally maps. The McNally house was completely destroyed there. More than 200 schools damaged, other public facilities, thousands and thousands of homes and businesses were lost. A lot of the work that I do focuses on urban planning. One of the communities that was destroyed is the Gregory Ine subdivision that was planned in 1947. We're studying this community because we have lots of information about this community. Of the 28 homes, 21 were destroyed. And that gives us an opportunity to look at why some houses survived and others didn't. Other famous structures like the Palisades Library, you can see the picture on the left, which was before the fire, and then the one that I took after the fire, completely destroyed. So what we do is we use 360 cameras. This is the Mosaic camera, which has 6 lenses to capture the imagery, 360 imagery, and integrate that with satellite, aerial, drone imagery. And we've created a platform. On the bottom shows what Google Street View shows. The top image shows for Lahaina, the imagery that we captured. We have various geographies that we use. And then the work we do is to try to figure out why some buildings, like this one, you can see this one with a red building, why that building survived and others didn't. And so the building on the bottom shows the 2017 imagery. And you can see they changed to a metal roof, changed the vegetation, other things to do to reduce the risk and spread of fire. It's very complicated, and so I think part of the work that we do is managing complexity and uncertainty, and then how we can use data to inform an understanding of what happened and what can be done. You know, many years ago, C.P. Snow wrote this book about the importance to have multiple cultures and perspectives and disciplines. He was talking about scientists and artists. I think we need to bring together other disciplines to study, especially with climate, the different types. Planning is all about knowledge to action and widening choice, but it's also about different types of forces at different scales. And so I think it's important to have different disciplines and then also spatial and temporal perspectives to manage the uncertainty around. And I think we need a combination of both top-down and bottom-up approaches that involve reducing the harm or risk or averting the types of disasters and threats. And so that's a lot of the work that we do. And I think one place to begin is to focus on cities or islands, or because they're readily observable. It's really hard with a large country. I work in Indonesia as well too. These are vast countries, and it's hard to look across a whole country as opposed to a smaller, more focused place. We have some successes. More recently, this past summer, FEMA released the Hazard Mitigation Policy Guideline. This document, 600 pages of different cases of success stories at the local level. California also introduced a new tool to track insurance claims. I can talk a little bit about the insurance disaster that's occurring. Also, as a planner, we're very interested in land use planning and the critical role of zoning and building codes. We used to teach the FireWise curriculum to reduce fire risk associated with this. And all of this is about communications and coordination and collaboration across different disciplines and hazards and threats. I'm showing some of the work that we developed for FEMA courses on climate adaptation for the emergency services sector, because one of the things we found out was that the wrong equipment, the wrong personnel, the wrong training was there to handle these types of wildfire cases, which are increasing in frequency, severity, and cost as well too. And so I think part of the work that we have to do is to build this curriculum and then to ensure that the right people are being trained. Another thing to do is to incorporate after-action reviews. And so we have a project to collect the information from these different studies that have been collected for different hazards and what are the common lessons across them. We have a big emphasis on nature-based solutions. It's really interesting to find some places like this Christmas tree lane in Altadena that did not burn while others were completely damaged. And right now, if you look at the nature-based solutions, a lot of it is about vegetation management, banning palm trees, iconic palm trees, because they're difficult to put out, and other types of solutions. But we think that we really have to look at examples. First generation, Cheonggyecheon is probably an example of a first generation nature-based solution. I think we can do better than this, introduce the power of nature to restore environments and rebuild back better. Another big emphasis is the focus on vulnerable at-risk, underserved populations who are disproportionately affected by impacts and disasters, and relate this back to the management systems that exist, and whether we use the Sustainable Development Goals or more local, state, or provincial. It makes sense to relate these back to measures of success. And I think the bottom line really comes down to sharing data as a beginning, but also working together to collaborate across different disciplines and to identify both common measures of success, but also the specific strategies, actions, and interventions that can lead to positive outcomes that first save lives, but also improve the quality of life and the environment for those impacted communities. So I encourage you to reach out. We love to collaborate, and here's my contact information. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Kim, for your insightful presentation. I think you provide us with some comprehensive understanding of how land use plan, the plan, nature-based solution can play a critical role in reducing the climate risk and some strengthening urban resilience. Okay, thank you. So let's show another presentation, Professor Kanaku Yuchi. So she will present on achieving urban resilience by merging engineering. Okay, warm welcome.
Good morning. Well, thank you for this invitation. I'm so honored to be here today. And I think many of you, because I'm from Tohoku University, which has been affected by the 3/11 14 years ago, many of you might be thinking I'll be talking about Tohoku, but rather, sorry, no, today's topic about Toyama City, which is located on the Japan seaside, but it's right next to the earthquake that affected Japan in Noto 2024 last year, about a year ago. And I thought this is a good case to introduce because with 10 minutes, I can introduce the essence of what we can do for a sustainable future. So, might be a little bit difficult to see, but I want to introduce the effort of Toyama City through 3 concepts towards resilience, which is I can't read, but then the engineering resilience, and then the other is socio-economic resilience, and then the third one is the organizational resilience. And it is important to approach from these resilience aspects because sustainable city is really difficult to achieve, and it's the challenge change over time. Sometimes the city grows, sometimes cities shrink, and then sometimes the city face hazard. And so by trying to solve the problems that emerge over time, we can at least aim to go forward to reach resilience and sustainable future. So the city of Toyama, maybe not many people have been heard about this city, but then it's really timely because for those who might be reading New York Times have seen it. It's been selected as one of the place to visit in New York Times 52 places to go in 2025. And the key words that's been written in the article was like a museum, Kengo Kuma, who's an architect, also festival, food. And so it really explained that place is rich in culture and then also for fun. And at the same time, it talks about Japan Alps and then talks about earthquake and then also a torrential rain. And so it's also very rich in nature and the climate, very diverse. And so now I'm talking about the resilience that I've introduced in the beginning. The first, I'll be talking about the engineering resilience. And thus, a purple square that you see in the map is the place where Toyama City locates. And that's been located between the 2 rivers that are one of the steepest river in Japan as well as worldwide. And what that means is that the water runs really quickly, and then because of that, the sedimentation has elevated the riverbed. So whenever the water or the rain hit the area really hard, it's really easy to have flood. And historically, this area has been really, really prone to flood and has been affected by many floods. And not only about the typhoons and rains during the rainy season, but also the earthquake that happened, for example, in the 1850s, that it brought the ground shaking and then also a lot of landslide, and then sort of let the river broke and then devastated the city of Toyama that is located near the ocean, as you can see in the simulation that the ministry have done recently in the bottom picture. And solution to that is that the engineering approach. So a flood control project has been done since 1890s for more than 60 years. And what they did was to construct levee along the river, and then also like changing the river path. And you can see in the bottom where you see the yellow path and then the pink path. The yellow path is the old river that has been transformed into the pink one to run straight. And what happened was after changing the river path, the yellow portion has been reclaimed, and then it has been used out the downtown of the Toyama city by adopting urban planning project. And as a result, the Toyama city has gained land, which is relatively safe from flood with the levee construction and flood control. The second resilience approach that they took is more recently in the early 2000s, the city was starting to face the decline because of the population decline and then also aging that I think Korea is also about to start facing. And also the motorization didn't help the city center. It supported the suburbanization, and it was really difficult for local government to sustain the infrastructure because everything is spread out. And so as a result, what they decided to do was to adopt the compact city approach. And compact city is basically trying to redevelop the downtown through the transportation, public transit system that everybody would be shifting from driving car to using the transportation, public transportation, and then the urban volume or the residential area will be built along the corridor or the transportation. And this was pretty successful. As you see in the figure on your left, that was immediately after the compact city approach was introduced. And you can see the people who have been moving into Toyama City is still pretty spread. But if you see the figure on your right, it's more recent in 2017 to 19. And you can see the volume is pretty much concentrated in the city center. And so this has been supporting the tax revenue as well. And so the city of Toyama is now doing better with the financial situation. And then also, not only the city, there are more retail shops in downtown, and then people are more active downtown. So it's more vibrant now than before. But more recently, we've been experiencing torrential rains and heavy rains. And then the third one is the organizational resilience that I'll be talking about. And remember, the city is not very safe from flood of where it's located. And also, they are using the land that have been reclaimed, the riverbed. And so it's still very not safe. And so if we do the simulation, we see if we use the 10-year return period of flooding, there are portions in the city that will have maximum of 3-meter flood risk that might overflow from the river. And also, we have accumulated the assets in the city center, and that means if something happened to the area, more people will be affected. And also, up until now, engineering departments and the urban planning departments have been running in parallel. They haven't been able to share much of the information back and forth. And so what they're doing right now is to connect these knowledge that's been accumulated in engineering departments and also planning department, and also the knowledge for resilient action. So now they know where to invest when they have limited funding for levee construction. And also they are thinking about other low-tech strategies that also we call paddy dam that could be adopted, towards the outskirt of the city. And it is really important also to mention that the organizations or the groups that has been working on the compact city are already connected. And so it's easier for utilizing them and having the hazard information through that network. And now they are working on learning about hazard maps, developing community hazard programs. And so they are becoming more resilient and then adapting the issues related to climate and flooding one by one by conversations. So this is my last slide. I introduced the effort of Toyama City from the engineering and socio-ecological and organizational aspects of resilience, which were like the hazard control, flood control physically, and then also the planning approach of the compact city, and then also the bridging between the engineering and planning to respond to the emerging issues that change over time. And lastly, what I want to say is that I believe that all different types of resilience is really important to achieve the real resilience for the sustainable future. And also, it can't be achieved in a short time. It needs to happen over time in the long path. And then having communication among stakeholders are really important because it's the only way to respond to evolving issues. So this is my end, and thank you so much for having me today again.
Thank you, Professor Kanako. I think the actual cases from Japan is about the resilience, disaster resilience. I think it's important to integrating engineering approach, planning approach, some socio-economic approach here. It's to reduce the disaster damages and to make the disaster resilient cities. Thank you. Our next presentation by Professor Jae-min Song. Her presentation is about policy strategies for managing extreme rainfall and enhancing urban resilience. Okay, please.
Thank you, Professor Yin. Good morning, everyone. It's my great honor to be part of this great event discussing on sustainable urban futures. And today, I'd like to share some of the planning approaches, not solution, but focusing on flood management in South Korea. Probably many Korean attendees here remember what happened 3 years ago in 2020 when we had the heaviest rainfall in my memory. And this downpour caused such a extensive damage resulting in 9 fatalities. The main causes of this extensive damage can be attributed to 3 main factors. So the first one is heavy rainfall. So due to climate change, the intensity and the frequency of heavy rainfall are steadily increasing. And the 2022 downpour brought an extraordinary 141.5 millimeter of rain per hour. But the current infrastructure capacity cannot cope with this kind of change. The Seoul's current sewer system is designed to manage up to 75 millimeters of rainfall per hour, which is far from sufficient to cope with such an extreme weather event. And vulnerable urban areas. So these 5 locations marked on the map are where the casualties took place. In the Sillim-dong area, highlighted with the red circle on the map, 3 people lost their lives in semi-basement housing unit. We call like 반지하 in Korea. And if you watch the Parasite movie, you might know what 반지하 means. So basically, it's a dwelling unit, underground living spaces with windows just upper the ground level. So during severe flooding, these units are particularly very, very dangerous as water can quickly pour in through windows and entrances. So the residents would have very, very, not much time to escape. In urban planning, we do have some measures to cope with this disaster. And I'd like to highlight 2 key policy instruments we have. The first one is disaster prevention districts. These are special purpose zones designated to mitigate various kind of disasters, and those districts can be designated if it meets one of the requirements if you see from the box. But the issue is the criteria itself is not really detailed or rigorous, and perhaps more problematically, citizens oppose having their neighborhoods being designated as a prevention district area. The resistance likely stems from concerns about negative imaginary or negative impacts on their property values. So as of now, we have only 6 designated districts related to natural disaster in South Korea. And the second important tool is disaster vulnerability assessment. So this assessment must be completed before any city develops or modify their master planning. So the assessment quantify vulnerability based on climate exposure and the sensitivity of physical environment and our resident populations. So basically, its goal is to identify high-risk areas which require special attention in master planning. Despite these frameworks, as we have seen, floodings continue to occur because first, there can be many other reasons, but among them, I do like to list the first thing, the current analysis system is not perfect. And second, system design guidelines haven't been updated to cope with the recent climate trends. Third, our systems are excessively rely on hot infrastructure. And lastly, even when we have accurate analysis, implementation gaps and departmental coordination are not working correctly. So what should we do? While comprehensive changes are needed, during my talk, I would like to focus on 3 things. The first one is, as I explained before, even though we have a vulnerability assessment planning tool, it's not working well because it's not effective enough to identify high-risk areas. So in fact, after the catastrophe in 2022, the government revised or improved the assessment process a little bit by having more finer analysis resolution and also adding some of the sensitivity indicators. But technical improvements alone are not enough, and we really need to make sure that those results would be applied to planning decisions. And the second area, yes, we really need to upgrade urban urban infrastructure design guideline, and also the need to expand nature-based solutions. As Professor Kim highlighted in the previous talk, nature-based solutions are really, really important, and those are, we leverage and expand natural ecosystem like greeneries and parks and wetlands and waterfront areas to create more sustainable and resilient cities. And I also have this Cheonggyecheon, project example. And many of Koreans are very familiar with this Cheonggyecheon, but it's a little bit old case, but I think it's some case we really need to we need to take a look. And the Cheonggyecheon restoration project transformed a concrete cover stream into waterway with flood mitigation capabilities. But the project not only reduced the flood risk, but also reduced urban heat island, and now became a kind of very popular place for tourists and Seoul citizens as well. And making these changes possible, I think policymakers and academia need to work together. Policy making process should be based on some evidence, and from the academia there should be some more fundamental research on the proper capacity design for urban structure that can withstand future climate scenarios. And at the same time, in order to take advantage of more NBS adoption, I think we need more studies that can quantify the benefit of nature-based solutions from at the multiple spatial scale, from individual building with green roof to rain garden in community to watershed management at the city scale. And here I'd like to emphasize that the MBS has so many multiple benefits in addition to just flood management or climate change adaptation. As we have seen from the Cheonggyecheon case, it can increase public health outcomes and enhance biodiversity, increase recreational opportunities, and also increase property value, etc. So if we can quantify those benefits, we can demonstrate the full value proposition of nature-based solution investment. And based on these evidence, the policy needs to, provide some targeted incentives to encourage the adoption of nature-based solutions, and maybe the government can have some of the demonstration projects to showcase best implementations and provide learning opportunities for scaling up these approaches. And lastly, I guess many cities or countries are facing similar issues, but Korea's issue is the fragmented approach among different departments with scattered and uncoordinated projects. So to increase effectiveness, we really need an integrated approach. And for that, I think we need, a place-based approach can be a way to promote more integrated approach. So we could establish kind of, resilient district with some positive concept, and by providing more incentives on these districts so that we can invite some of the fragmented projects or funds to focus on one, specific area, tailored to unique challenges of that area, considering topology, demographics, existing infrastructure, and social vulnerability, etc. After experiencing last summer's extreme weather, I think the reality of climate change has become undeniable for all of us. And unfortunately, the climate impact will likely be intensified in the coming years. And yes, there are many areas needed to become a sustainable future, but creating this climate resilient city may be our first urgent priority area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Song, for your insightful presentation. I think you made a good point to improve the disaster prevention in Seoul. So improving the accuracy, increasing capacity, and adopting nature-based solution is a kind of a key things to improve our disaster prevention and increase the urban resilience. Okay, thank you. And our final speaker for today's session is Professor Taedong Lee from Yonsei University. He will be presenting on companies and climate change. Okay, Professor Lee, please.
Thank you for giving me a chance to share my research. Today's topic is companies, not the urban or cities. Let me give you the three conclusions at the beginning. So first, company is the key actor for climate resilience and adaptation, not just mitigation. Second, how can we change their behavior using the guidelines? So in particular, ESG information disclosure for adaptation is the key, because currently, ESG information on climate change mostly focus on mitigation and greenhouse gas emission reduction. Third, but we do not have a ESG information disclosure for adaptation so far. So that's the reason why our research team on climate adaptation living labs try to co-create the adaptation information disclosure guideline with ESG partners of companies. Okay, this is me. I'm under distinguished professor in Yonsei University and also leading the climate adaptation living lab R&D with about 45 researchers. And also I'm leading a transformative climate research and education project-wide with 20 faculty members in Yonsei University, from 12 departments. So I'm writing a book with climate adaptation and living like this. Okay, so climate change real, yes. And I'll probably skip this part because you probably all know about the climate change is real. In South Korea, yes, South Korea annual temperature rise in about 0.8 degrees Celsius, higher than the global average. And you probably note that we will have a summer from April to November this year. It's a long summer. And that's the reason why we need to have a climate adaptation. So in 2022, we had a Typhoon Hinnamno, and that hit Pohang area. So Pohang has a Pohang Steel Company, and the damage was about $2 billion. And about 10 people died who wanted to grab their car in the underground parking lot. So the company is not just emitting the greenhouse gas emission. Company has directly impacted by climate change. And also we can see that there's a lot of changes in terms of food production, food cultivation, and crop cultivation map is kind of changing now. And also there's other food and agricultural or fishery products as well. And you see that the huge economic loss we see in the Hawaii case or Japan or South Korea and globally. And we can see that the loss in financial sectors and companies. So from the companies are so important because out of 10 biggest emitter in South Korea emit about 50% of greenhouse gas emission in South Korea. And also they are really vulnerable from the climate change like drought, flood, and so on. So we need to have some solution for that. So as you all know, the adaptation is a bit different to the mitigation because it's more policy authority focus more on the local government or broader scope and bottom-up approach and nation-oriented and present and future. So it's more difficult to measure and tackle the problem with adaptation. So when we look at the how with the adaptation concept has developed, it's developed later in when you look at the COP. So they just begin the adaptation measure in COP 7, and in COP 13 we had the Bali actions. But you know what? We do not have global goal on adaptation yet. We have carbon neutrality and things like that, net zero, but we do not have global goal on adaptation because it's so complicated. And however, we need to have the grasp the ideas of adaptation. Also, we need to develop further for the adaptation measures. So adaptation is to reduce risk from the predicted level of climate change impact without compromising ecological, economic, and social sustainability. So based on this concept, we developed the concept or definition of corporate climate adaptation activity through which company manages climate risk, mitigating damage. That's the first. Second, we need to create market value for the opportunities. So company is a kind of money-making organization. So, normative argument may not work that well. So reducing risk is reducing the cost. And also if you have if a company provide services and make money out of it, and that'll be a value, market value opportunity for the company. So it's really important to persuade companies to tackle the climate adaptation with reducing risk and making market opportunities. So we see that there are a lot of pressure for companies adopting the ESG, but nowadays it's kind of the fashion is that kind of slow down. But still, we have a pressure for having more ESG component in the company operation. So some of the case, CJ, see the headband, so aseptic packaging technology to deal with the temperature rise, or Hanwha and many others try to adopt heavy rain, flooding countermeasures and cool roof project, things like that. And also we can see that the other companies around the world, Bank of America, climate adaptation strategy, they established a climate adaptation strategy, and also they had a stress test for the financial bodies to tackle the climate adaptation, and also unilever climate adaptation systems. And also, as we heard, insurance are so keen on this issue as well. So this is the thing that we are working on. But so how can we change the behavior of companies? So if there's a good guideline for companies' climate adaptation activities, that would be really helpful. But when we had an interview with ESG, specialists in the company, basically they just focus on the climate change mitigation, reducing greenhouse gas emission. But they are facing that drought. For example, TSMC or Samsung Electronics, if they do not have water, and they cannot make products. When I had a project with LG Chemical in Yosu, they had a same issue. So we need to have how they deal with this climate adaptation with a good guidelines. Fortunately, we have some of the international effort to make climate change adaptation guidelines, such as ISSB, International Sustainable Standard Board, and TCFD. And so, however, the problem is that Korean government announced that we are going to have a ESG, mandatory ESG, after 2026. But we do not know when would that be the beginning of mandatory ESG. Because if the ESG report, information disclosure, is just about voluntary, there's no such incentive for companies to, make an effort to ESG, operation. So it's really important to make a ESG quick and thorough, comprehensive measure for climate change adaptation and mitigation. So mandatory ESG disclosure is a really important issue. So however, when we review the whole literature, we don't see that many. So this is the kind of, I know it's a small, but we have about 30, more than 30 components in the climate adaptation for corporations, for regarding the transition risk and fiscal risk, and how we make this guideline comprehensive and workable with Living Lab. Living Lab is the way to make solution with users. So we try to make this not just by the researcher, with ESG partner in company, we are trying to make the guideline with them. That's the co-creation part. Then we are trying to test it with others, with experimental research. So that's how we are going to do, and we are trying to have a patent for that. So that's the reason why the letter is so small. Okay, so this is a thing that we are trying to do for how we enhance the sustainability of companies, in particular in the climate adaptation response. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lee. Professor Lee talked about the strategies of climate change adaptation of companies. So thank you for your presentation. I think we have 10 minutes to go, so I think open the question on the floor to take. So if you have some questions, please. Yeah, Andy. Oh, sure. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentations. You mentioned the importance about developing climate resilient cities, and so that requires a lot of I guess investment. So can you please comment on what are the models in terms of finding the financial resources to convince people to actually invest into these measures that will make their cities more climate resilient?
Yeah, that's a very good and important question. I mean, really, there are two approaches that we've been looking at. The first is a regulatory approach, changes in building codes. And as I think Kanako pointed out, it takes a long time for these sorts of changes in best practices to be implemented, and typically only apply to new construction or redevelopment of big projects. Another way, which I think we're talking about, is how to incentivize investment in climate positive types of technologies, and in the United States, we tried to do that through the Infrastructure Investment Acts to reward or support the development of climate adaptation strategies, the implementation of more, for example, battery electric vehicle systems, charging systems. A lot of the work that we've been doing has been looking at the unanticipated consequences of those new technologies. For example, battery electric vehicle fires, of which now there are some notorious ones even in Korea. And that's the need to sort of train and to prepare emergency responders to handle new technologies that have brought in that can create disincentives for investment in new systems. But I think ultimately it does come down to identifying new profitable products and goods and services that reduce the costs, both the short term, but also over the long term, which is the hardest to calculate. So more return on investment studies, I think, will help with this?
Well, thank you so much for the important question. And I think it has to go with the time, meaning that Japan, we were fortunate for having a lot of funding up until now when we had a strong economy. But from now on, we do have to figure out how to use the limited resources also financially. And that's the reason why I mentioned about the organizational resilience, where I think the communication is really important. And with still like hoping that we get minimum of resources that need to be invested maybe from the government, but then we can't really do the plan and implement the ideal plan into the actual action. We do it's now we are at the stage where we need to figure out where would be the one that we really need to protect, whereas where are the aspect where we would have to let go. And for instance, there are places in Japan also where we are not maintaining the road or bridge that falls but won't be able to support it, putting it back to the system. But we can't really do as how it used to be 20 years ago. And the communication has to be there with the different levels, the government of the national, prefectural, local, as well as the communities. Because, community feel abandoned if they weren't informed how that decisions are being done. And as long as the communities are at least able to voice, and then on the same platform where they can also voice to say which one is important for them and which is less important for them, we can probably make more reasonable decisions with the limited resources. And then the other thing is that while we are looking into more of the digitized world where we rely on the digital information, we also need to rely on the traditional knowledge or the traditional low-tech solutions, where I was talking about the paddy dam. It's basically the dam that you let, you just pull the block out when the flood is about to the water is about to flood to the city. They just let the little blocks out to go that water into the paddy. And so with that, I think we need to approach the limited resource to make the best use of it by sharing old, new knowledge, and also the inputs from the very local people to the government. So I think that's what we want to take.
Can I add very briefly on the Korean case? As far as I understand, from Koreans' perspective, many of the climate change adaptation projects are led by or funded by public money, but it has, of course, limitation. And I think in the future, we really need to activate the industry, as Professor Lee just mentioned, by creating like market value for climate change adaptation. Recently, I had a chance to work with a company working on permeable block, so for road pavement. But the thing is, since we have mitigation goal or mitigation target, those mitigation efforts are easily like recognized. But for adaptation, because of the lack of research and also because of the difficulty in proving the adaptation, like performance, I think that's something in academia we really need to work on to prove how much in dollar value or in other value climate change adaptation can achieve a certain level of performance.
Or any other questions? Okay.
Hello, very interesting panel. My field is international relations, so I'm really enjoying, to learn something on a topic that I know very little of. My question pertains to the connection between adaptation and mitigation. In climate diplomacy, adaptation is the forgotten child. Basically, the Paris Agreement doesn't really include very much. And I was very impressed with the notion that if, as Dr. Lee pointed out, if we monetize the issue, then companies will have a better incentive. What are your thoughts about whether by motivating companies to do adaptation, we can also motivate them to contribute to mitigation? Is there a linkage?
So, yes. So that depends on what kind of industry you work on. But in the construction industry, I work with some of the construction companies, GS Construction, and also we discussed about climate-proof apartment. That would be good for the mitigation because they incorporate green building component to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And also, they try to incorporate the component for the adaptation, reducing flood risk or heat island issue, things like that. So, it's really hard to cut. This is a mitigation and this is an adaptation. But in many cases, real case, we could have a co-productions that they would co-benefit for the mitigation and adaptation. Things like that. So that's the reason why we need to have a creativity from this participant. What kind of things that we combine, mitigation and adaptation, and also that's good for making money and also creating jobs and also handling the climate change risk as well.
I just gave a talk recently about mitigation and adaptation, and I started by pointing out that there are at least 3 different definitions of mitigation. The first, I think what you're referring to is like greenhouse gas mitigation, right? Reducing or decarbonization and technologies to do that. The second one is the one that disaster managers use, which is really about hazard mitigation, reducing the harm from natural hazards, from flooding, from earthquakes, and what are the types of things that you can do to reduce harm in that way. There actually is an earlier definition that was used primarily for documenting environmental impacts associated with construction and development. And that's really, traffic management, traffic mitigation plans. So we have 3 very different notions about mitigation. And then with adaptation, it's very difficult because the definitions and the measurements of that are kind of unfolding. I mean, we talk about maladaptation, which is unintended consequences or things that were not what we thought they were going to do. But with adaptation, we're really talking about system changes as well, too. And how then do we monetize that or capture the values with that? And that's why I think the work that Dr. Lee is doing is very, very important in terms of reaching both global understanding of what this is, but actually it comes down to the companies and the communities that are bearing the kind of impacts associated with the sorts of changes that we would like to see happen.
Okay, thank you for your response. I think I need to close this session, but before we close, please give a big round of applause to our speakers. I think in this session we discussed the importance of climate change adaptation and climate resilience to maintain our cities sustainable in the future. So thank you for being part of this session. So I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference today. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope you guys enjoyed the interesting discussion on climate resilience in the setting of urban planning and development. Once again, thank you very much, all the esteemed panels. And perhaps you guys can continue discussing about the questions and comments after the session during the lunch break. So that brings us to the lunch break until 1 p.m. and we're going to come back with even more interesting sessions in the afternoon. So don't forget to join again. Thank you.